Okay, welcome back. By the way, breaking news. It looks like the appeals court in Arizona has ruled in favor of Katie Hobbs against Kari Lake. We're going to get to the details. That's just breaking. I want to give you the headlines. I want to go back to other breaking news. You got to explain this to me, Leahy, because you're smarter than I am. I don't understand this article you just sent me from local TV. You got to. What is DeWine doing here? You got to help me out here. I mean, this thing's a disaster for these people. This is catastrophic. What is the governor doing?
He's not declaring an emergency and not declaring a disaster. That's what he's doing. Now, I want to add to that. For a disaster declaration, there are two kinds. The governor has to request of FEMA. And there are two kinds: an emergency declaration for anything, which has a limit of like $5 million, unless and then if you go over that, you got to go to Congress and tell them you want more money. But the major declaration of a disaster, or like a hurricane, etc., there's a little bit at the end of that guideline. You can also call a major declaration for, wait for it, an explosion. Now, I think there was an explosion there of chemicals on February 3rd, and then a controlled burn that was an explosion on February 6th. So the governor could call for a major declaration of a disaster there. He could send it to FEMA, and they would probably not turn it down if he did it. But he's got to put his case together, as you pointed out, Steve. I don't think he wants to do that.
Because he has to put the timeline and who had authority and decisions he made and what were they based upon. He'd have to put it in the package to take it to FEMA. He could declare it, but to get it declared by the federal government, or I guess supported by the federal government to actually get your money, he would have to actually put together a package that laid through everything that was done, and that's not going to look very good, is it, Michael Patrick Leahy?
Well, if there is no authorization from the federally designated on-site coordinator from the EPA, it's going to look very bad. And the FEMA might say, this is your problem, buddy. You created the problem, and we're not going to give you any money. Now, that if he put the declaration in, the political pressure would be there for FEMA to say yes. But they're not in a hurry, and Governor DeWine is also not in a hurry.
You just heard Nick Sortor, who's doing a terrific job out there. The people feel like they've been abandoned. I mean, obviously, I'll talk afterwards. We got to help pull this together because they feel like they've been abandoned. But to a degree, they have been abandoned. And here's what's so outrageous about it. Sherrod Brown's a Democrat and a populist. He's got to get involved here. This is a MAGA state. And they just had on Fox the other day, they had somebody, one of the announcers saying, well, I just talked to the congressman. He thinks Biden's doing a great job out here. Right? I don't understand why the Republicans and DeWine and these guys, this is Ohio. The reason we're even competitive in these presidential elections is because Ohio, we're winning Ohio with a big enough gap. It allows us to spend time and money. It's the opportunity cost. You don't need to be in Ohio. Look at J.D. Vance, the big one we had there in the Senate. And Sherrod Brown should be on the endangered species list. And guess what? He's not going to be because of this very situation there. I hate to get down to politics about this, but somebody's got to have these people back. First off, you should just do it as your normal job, right? And DeWine's always saying about, how he's all about the people and, with the pandemic and everything like this. This is really outrageous. And I got to tell you, people have to be held accountable for this. The company's got to be held accountable, but also the government officials. And right now you can tell Biden just wants this thing to go away. He doesn't want Pete Buttigieg out there. He doesn't want any big time EPA people out there. They want to wash their hands of it. Michael Patrick Leahy, your closing thoughts.
Well, my closing thought is right now there needs to be political pressure from everyone in the congressional delegation in Ohio, in addition to the Democrat senator up for re-election, Sherrod Brown, to push Governor DeWine to call for, ask for the declaration of a major disaster because of this explosion. It's right there in the federal FEMA regulation. He can do that, get that to FEMA as soon as possible, and get the federal aid rolling in to the good people in East Palestine, Ohio.
We're going to get even more involved in this, Leahy. We got to make this thing happen. This is why you set these great papers up, these great news sites. You were the guy that got the joke first of how important this is, and this is a perfect example. This is kind of a example of everything. Shows you a nation in decline because the people in authority, quote unquote, the elites, don't care. They don't care. And the people at East Palestine, Ohio, are the ones that fight your wars, build your country, pay the taxes, just want to get along and be left alone, right? In situations like this, extraordinary situations, they want to make sure that somebody's got their back. And the government not only doesn't have their back, it's working against them. And this controlled burn, like you said, if you had done this in your yard or something like that, you'd be under arrest right now. You have criminal charges filed against you. That's what's so outrageous about this thing. And if this was in the East Hamptons, trust me, okay, if this out there near Shinnecock or in the beautiful East Hamptons, if this happened out there, they would have done, they would have flown, the top experts in the world have been flown in before anybody touched anything. Okay. And that's the injustice. And that's this kind of burning discontent that the American people, because they can look right there and say, that's me. I'm that little guy. This is why Hillary Clinton called them the deplorables. They don't matter. They're deplorable. Just they're nothing. They're trash. That's it. We treated these people out there like trash, and they're not trash. They're actually the backbone of the country. That's the difference. Michael Patrick Leahy, how do we get to all your sites, all your coverage? You're doing an incredible job.
TheOhioStar.com, TheStarNewsNetwork.com. You can reach me on Twitter, Getter, or Truth Social at Michael P. Leahy.
Michael, thank you so much. Great work.
Great to be with you again, Steve.
Thanks, brother. I had an entirely different show we're going to do tonight. I had Peter Thiel. Hugh Hewitt actually did a very good interview with Peter Thiel this morning. And Peter, this was on China. He got on some very interesting topics. I'll do that. Natalie Winters is going to join me. We're going to deconstruct coming right off Biden's, the illegitimate regime head, Joe Biden's, what he did, this fiasco day. I was going to have Peter Thiel off the Hugh Hewitt show. We're going to break it all down, talk about that. Then I was going to roll into some things that are happening, particularly in, I don't think people realize in crypto and in Bitcoin, kind of the surge that got to reach out to the bomb thrower. I should call him the mad bomb thrower, Mark Jeftovik up in Canada. Brother, thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk a little bit about crypto, and I particularly want to talk because you follow this quite, you do so much great stuff. And I got to tell you, I'm so appreciative that you give me a heads up on these great articles you write, because I want to tell the audience, Jeftovik, he doesn't send me a lot, but when he sends me stuff, I'll read it right away. And I got to tell you, within 24 hours, it's up as the lead story over at Zero Hedge, which is the benchmark for what's hot and what's smart. So thanks for joining us, brother. Talk to me about Bitcoin and crypto overall.
Hey, Steve, thanks for your kind words. What can I say? Bitcoin is off to its greatest calendar year start in its history. And I typically tell my readers, don't pay a lot of attention to the short-term price gyrations of this stuff. We're long-term thinkers, long-term oriented. But when a 12% move happens in 5 hours, like it did yesterday, even I sit up in my chair, and when I look back at it, it's just, this feels like a Bitcoin bottom, which is really right on schedule for a cycle that's baked straight into the protocol.
Well,
if you look at,
hang on, I want to say something. We don't give investment advice here. We do this as much strategically because we're trying to build alternative economies. The public square. We want people to have alternatives, particularly so people don't hate you. But I thought this is what's going to shock the audience. Everything I've read, crypto's finished. The government's going to shut it all down. Bitcoin's dead. Everything's dead. Everybody was a sucker. This is all ridiculous. Walk us through what have been the price shifts here.
If you put up the first slide on the assets so far this year, we see like Bitcoin is up the most out of everything this year, including oil, including gold, including the NASDAQ. And lately, cryptos have been trading with the NASDAQ quite a bit. And in my mind, like everyone, you said, people badmouth Bitcoin. Will the governments allow it? What I always tell people is to invert that. I don't think about this in terms of will the government allow Bitcoin. I think of this in terms of which governments are going to survive Bitcoin. In your previous segment, you talked about a nation in decline. We're also witnessing a monetary system in decline, and we're witnessing late stage globalism in decline. And that's why things like Bitcoin won't die. No. And not only will they not die, every cycle will come back.
Hang on, brother. 19, the Congressional Budget Office in the New York Times, these are not people with their hair on fire. $19 trillion in the next 10 years. They say that's not sustainable. $19 trillion on top of the 32, that gets you over $50 trillion. No country, in fact, the holding of the public holding of debt at the Treasury, at the Fed, is going to be over 100% of the economy. Not the total debt. That'll be hundreds of times the economy. No country's ever come. Look at the New York Times today. I've preached this now for 2 shows. We're going to do it again tomorrow. No country on earth has ever come back from this. And this is your betters. So talk to me about, when you talk about alternative and you talk about crypto, walk me through how this, in your logic, how this is rebounding.
Well, it's rebounding for a couple of reasons. Most of the people were waiting for something called the Fed pivot, for the central banks to kind of take their foot off the gas pedal on the interest rate hikes. And everyone, and I think correctly so, has been saying the Fed can't keep raising interest rates, to your point, with that much debt out there. But there's another aspect of Bitcoin which is sort of dovetailing with this slow motion Fed pivot that hasn't really been paid attention to, and that's the 4-year halving cycle in Bitcoin. And so every 4 years, it just means, without getting too technical, every 4 years, the mining block reward for mining Bitcoin and securing the blockchain, it cuts in half, and it creates a supply shock in the system. And because Bitcoin is the opposite of fiat money in that you can't inflate it to nothing, every time this cuts in half, it becomes an order of magnitude more valuable. Each unit becomes more valuable. It creates sort of like a buying pressure in the system. And if we look at where we are in the cycle now, it's like clockwork. So what happens is, about 15 months before the next halving, Bitcoin starts its rise. And that, I think, is what is happening here, even more than the Fed pivot. If you look at that second slide I sent over, the next Bitcoin halving is in May 2024, and 15 months before May 2024 is actually February, like right now. And in fact, Bitcoin and cryptos bottomed in December. And then since December, they've just taken off like rockets. We saw the first slide, how it compares to the other assets. And in that last table I sent you, this pattern, I mean, technical analysts will tell you to be wary of patterns because they're not etched in stone. But the Bitcoin pattern is actually baked into the protocol itself because of this 4-year halving cycle. And we see from 2011 all the way up to 2022, we have 3 up years, a down year, 3 up years, a down year, 3 up years, and a down year. And we just had our down year. It just went by. So there's another halving coming 15 months down the road in 2024. And with all of the other political and geopolitical and financial tailwinds hitting Bitcoin, we've got governments weaponizing the banking system against their citizens, against each other. There are even more impetus to get into Bitcoin and protect your wealth.
Well, we're going to spend a lot more time on this. Mark, I want you to give how everybody gets, but I just got to ask you a question because you're also a numbers guy. This is impossible. This is insanity. This is suicide for a nation. You think we're in managed decline? If we go down this path of the plan they've laid out, which are, and I called it $1.4 trillion in a deficit this year, which they lied about, and this is from the CBO, it's reported by the New York Times, $2 trillion in deficits in every year going forward in perpetuity. Okay? This is financial suicide. And that is going to destroy and by the way, the only reason they can get away with this is because they got the Federal Reserve over there that they hit the button, and the Federal Reserve creates more fiat money. And people think more money, more wealth. It's the exact opposite. The more money, the more destruction of wealth. And this is what we're going to get to. This is part of this crisis. You got the geopolitical global war crisis merging in with the financial crisis, just like the 1930s. You're having the convergence of those two right now. And I'm telling you, it's going to be Katie bar the door. Jeftovik, how do people get to you in all your sites? Because your stuff's amazing. And like I said, when Mark sends me something, the next day, boom, it's up as a lead of Zero Hedge, which is a pretty good. That's my New York Times. So how do they get to you, Jeftovik?
Well, I always appreciate that. So bombthrower.com is the main website for the articles. You can get on the mailing list there for the free crypto capitalist report. And if you want to go straight to the newsletter, just go to the cryptocapitalist.com and you hit subscribe and you're there. So
thank you, Mark. Great work.
Bomb Thrower on Getter and Stunt Pope on Twitter. I forgot those two.
I follow a Bomb Thrower on Getter. It's fantastic. We'll make sure we get them all up in the chat rooms. Thanks, Mark. Great work.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. Always a pleasure.
You got to look at alternatives. You must look at alternatives. One of the reasons we're doing this for all the alternative economy stuff, remember, stop giving money to people who hate you. By the way, the guys that hate you the most are the guys in charge of this. If the same thing you're seeing out in East Palestine, Ohio, this is exactly what it is. They think you're trash. And they're just, you do this, if we do this, if we follow this plan that's laid out in the CBO, your children and grandchildren not only will be destroyed, they will curse our generation if we let that happen. I got to tell you, some worked up folks out there in Arizona. Let's go to Floyd Brown of the Western Journal. Floyd, you're the guy I always turn to for all things out west, particularly in the great state of Arizona. Breaking news, the appellate court ruled for Katie Hobbs. Walk us through it, sir.
Yeah, so what we know is that the appellate court is as corrupt as the trial court was. And, you've got to pray for Arizona at this point because, we faced corrupt election officials. We faced an unbelievably corrupt system. And now the judges aren't stepping forward. They aren't stepping up and doing the right thing. What we're dealing with is an entire corrupt system. So,
is it? Hang on. Is it corruption? Was the ruling? But why do you say the ruling's corrupt? Is it they didn't agree with our facts, or we didn't make the right arguments? Are you saying, hey, we had the right arguments, the right facts, and they didn't use the law?
That's right. We have the right arguments. We have the right facts. We have, I think our fact pattern is absolutely excellent for a case like this. I mean, remember, this is not a traditional lawsuit. This is an election challenge. And this election was an unbelievable mess. If I hadn't lived through it, I say this to a lot of people, if I hadn't lived through it myself and seen it firsthand, I wouldn't believe what happened in Maricopa County. I mean, literally 400,000 plus ballots, Steve, wouldn't feed into the machines. They were kicked out. We have no chain of custody on any of those ballots. We have, thousands, tens of thousands of ballots showing up after the election. I mean, the fact case was excellent. And, I think Kurt Olson and the lawyers that were involved did an excellent job. But in the end, these judges are just throwing up their hands and they're saying, it doesn't really matter. We don't care what the facts are. We don't care what the law is. We're just not going to overrule this. And that's corruption.
There's one quote in here. Maybe we only got a couple minutes, Floyd, but there's a quote in here. Arizona law recognizes only limited grounds to contest election results for state office. You guys had you came in and laid out the case within those kind of verticals. What is their complaint?
Yeah, no, we did lay out the case. That's why I call it corruption. I call it judges not stepping up and doing their job. And what we are facing. I mean, I heard your last segment, Steve, where you talked about how the Federal Reserve and the federal government are spending us into an absolute abyss. Well, not only are those institutions failing, we have these state institutions that are failing. Our elections are failing, and we don't live in a constitutional republic if, in fact, our leaders are selected and not elected. And we know that that's happened in at least 2 cycles here in Arizona. And it's absolutely outrageous. But I call it the systemic failure, the systemic failure of our basic institutions. And if the judges won't step up and correct things, I don't know what hope we have.
Floyd, we got to bounce. I want everybody to go to you. What's your social media and how they get to Western Journal?
Well, it's westernjournal.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Floyd Brown. I'm also on True Social and Getter at Floyd Brown. So follow me there, and I'll try and keep you updated on this.
Yeah.
But what we're facing is systemic failure. Systemic failure.
I agree. Maybe we'll get up on Getter late night. I'll talk to you right after this, Floyd. Okay. Boy, had to rechange the show, but man, it was great. I learned so much I didn't know. See you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We're going to be on fire. See you here in the War Room.